All right, folks, we're back with another fact-filled episode of All About the Gear. Doug K and I are back once again to talk about a camera that's been sort of making waves around the photoverse over the past month or so, and that's the Sony RX100 Mark III. Doug K got his hands on one and did his Doug K thing, took it out and about, and I think he may have even purchased one, but that might be letting the cat out of the bag whether he thinks it's worth it or not. So Doug, what's going on? The Sony RX100 Mark III. What is this camera? And some say it's a point and shoot. Some say it's not a point and shoot. What is it?
Well, first of all, yes, I have purchased it, and to be honest, I purchased so much stuff that's not a very high bar. That's not much of a threshold. But I did replace a Canon S95. But that's back to your question. What's the difference between a point and shoot and a compact camera? And the fact is that I do not know. This is the little guy we're talking about, the Sony RX100 Mark III. And as you might guess, it is the third in the line of RX100 cameras from Sony.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It looks very sleek, simple, black. It looks like a tool rather than a toy.
Yeah. It's a nice little camera. And we did review the RX100 Mark II only 7 months ago. So why? Well, I should let you ask the question. But why would we so quickly review another one, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that goes to what are the deltas on this one between this one and the Mark II.
That is the question, isn't it? Well, it's pretty much the same sensor as far as I can tell. It's a 20 megapixel sensor. It's fairly large for these cameras. It's a 1-inch sensor, which really does set it apart from the other point and shoots that have usually quite a bit smaller sensors in them. The two big things about this are, first, this is one of the first cameras in this class to have a pop-up electronic viewfinder. And you push this little button here. You see the best way to show you this. If I push this, and the electronic viewfinder pops up, right? You can see that.
And that was one of the things that we dinged the Mark II on, because it didn't have that, but it had a hot shoe, and right. you could buy a viewfinder for it, but it was really expensive, right?
The viewfinder was about half the price of the camera or more, as I remember. Yeah. This one pops up like this, and then what you do is you pull it out. You need to do that because otherwise it doesn't focus properly. So that's the profile view of it, if you will. Oh, and this is the back view. Now, this is sort of the critical point for this camera, because some people could not care less about whether it has an EVF or not. And for some people, like me, the electronic viewfinder is very important because I much prefer to look through something, except when I'm shooting over my head or down low. Mm-hmm. So that's the first big thing. The second
but it sounds like folks like you may have won out, because had the folks that didn't care about the EVF won, then they would have stuck with the Mark II design, which is if you need it, you can go pay extra coin and get one, right?
That's right. You can absolutely do that, because the Mark II and the original RX100 are still available, and they're quite a bit cheaper in some cases. Cool. The other big thing about this Mark III is the lens. What they've done with the lens here is that they've gone to a lens that's f1.8 at the widest aperture to f2.8 at the f1.8 at the widest focal length, and only f2.8 at the longest, most telephoto focal length. So you're getting quite a bit faster lens than the other one. The full frame equivalent of this guy is 24 to 70. So for those people who are used to a DSLR with a 24 to 70 lens, this really puts you right in that mid-range zoom range.
Nice.
So it's faster. It doesn't go quite as long. They think the old camera went out to about 100 millimeter equivalent, but it is a gorgeous lens, and the combination, of course, and the lens and the sensor have been tuned quite nicely, making for some pretty terrific image quality.
Now, Doug, looking at this, you also recently purchased the A7, right? The A7. You have an A7S right
now? I have an A7 and an A7S.
So when do you choose to take this guy out versus one of those cameras?
Yeah, that's the ultimate question. When do you take this? This camera fits in my pocket. It's a little bit thicker than the last version, which in fact was thicker than the one before it. So it's starting to be a bit of a bulge, but this does go in the pocket. And if I'm running out the door and don't have anything I need to shoot, but I want to have a camera with me, this is the one I take. It's the go anywhere just in case you want to take a picture camera. And I can't do that with the A7s because they don't fit in a pocket.
Yeah. And what's the price of this guy?
Good question. This is an $800 camera, and that makes it probably the most expensive in what you might call the point and shoot category.
No, so I would look at the A7, A7S as pro bodies, right? Those are pro level cameras that, we've got, Sony artisans doing commercial shoots with, and, folks just love those cameras. When you get a camera like this in your hands, do you feel like you're limited in it? Notwithstanding the fact that you can't interchange the lenses on there, but do you feel like that if you needed to create, like, to put a finer point on it, if you didn't have your A7 bodies and you needed to go do a somewhat commercial job, could you do it with a little camera like this? Is the quality there?
I don't know. I certainly wouldn't take it on a commercial job. Actually, I would take it, and I might use it for environmental shots and behind the scenes shots. Here's what I look at this camera as. I say, first of all, it's not a low light camera. It's not a sports camera. It's not a shallow depth of field camera because of the small sensor. So this is a camera when I want to take mid-range images, not super wide, not super telephoto, in pretty good light. And it's great for that. It really works out well.
Okay. Cool. I mean, it sounds like a nice. So let's talk about the ergonomics of the thing. So the body, the controls, and all that. What was your feeling when you put this in your hands? Is it especially compared to the one before it, the Mark II?
Yeah, it's heavier. It's a little bit thicker. I don't have a Mark II or an original one to show you, but it's like I say, it's starting to get a little bit on the thick side. It does have a pop-up flash, it has a pop-up flash, but as you mentioned, it has no hot shoe because what they've done, let me turn it on here, they have put the pop-up flash where the hot shoe used to live, right?
Okay.
The hot shoe used to be in the middle and the pop-up flash was off to the side. Yeah. Now, if I open up that viewfinder, you see the viewfinder is where the pop-up flash used to be.
Right.
So no hot shoe. And what that means to the video guys, of course, is no external plugins. We'll talk about that in a minute. Same basic controls on the back and the top. No real change there. Using Uncle Doug's exposure triangle test, in which what we're doing is we're looking for how easy is it to get to shutter speed, aperture, exposure compensation, and ISO. It gets a 6 out of 12, which is pretty good for a camera of this size. And one nice thing about it also, let me say one thing about this viewfinder, which is sort of cool. If I close the viewfinder, the camera powers down, which you may or may not want. But certainly, if you pop up the viewfinder, that turns the camera on. And that's one extra thing you don't have to do. Startup time's only about 1 second. So compared to some of the point and shoots I've had, I really like the fact that I can get it to start up real quick.
Is that configurable? So say I didn't want that to happen. Can I turn that on and off?
Not as far as I can tell. I think it's hardwired into the camera.
Okay. Cool. What about charging? I know some of these cameras allow you to charge batteries inside, and some of the Sony cameras require you to put them in a charger. What about this guy?
Yeah, you can do both. It does not come with a charger. You can charge the battery in the camera. But if you want to charge it in an external charger, you have to buy one, and you can get one from Sony for a lot of money. There's some aftermarket ones that seem pretty good too.
Okay. And then what about the menu on there? It's got that quick menu. I know, right? I mean, because it's the same UI as the old Mark II, right? Yeah,
and it's pretty much the same now across the line of these things. You've got quick menu, but again, no touch. So Sony, come on, listen to us. But once you get into the regular menu system, it's pretty much the same as all of Sony's cameras now. The whole Alpha line, anything except the NEX cameras use pretty much this same menu structure that we've gotten used to and learned to hate.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, we got some comments on previous episodes of All About the Gear from folks that are commenting on our, Sony, not Sony bashing, but us taking Sony calling Sony out for the lack of touchscreen, and I think one commenter said something like, um, they don't need touchscreens on a professional grade camera.
Right.
Now this one, of course, breaks that mold. It's not a professional grade camera. What do you say to that? I mean, you're a pro shooter. You have Sony Alpha Gear. I mean, do you fall in the camp of pro shooters, you should be twisting knobs and pressing buttons and not touching the touchscreen, and that's for the cell phone generation?
You could say the same thing about post processing. You can say, hey, why can't I just shoot a JPEG and be done? Maybe the best example is a friend of mine who for years refused to go with anything that had a graphical user interface on his computer. He says, all I need is a terminal window and VI text editor. I can type any command I need. Who needs a mouse? And I haven't seen him in a long time, but I think he's probably using a mouse by now.
Yeah.
I was in that camp. I thought touchscreens were useless and stupid until I had a camera for long enough to really get to use it. The Panasonics are probably some of the best touchscreens.
Yeah.
And you converted before I did, but I have to say, I've come around.
Yeah. I don't know. I look at it as it's technology. I mean, the smartphones kind of ushered in the idea that we can interact with our data through touch. And now I just think, and most things with screens, especially something like that is tactile as a camera, it just makes sense for you to be able to interact with and touch areas that you want to be in focus and all that stuff. I don't think it's a gimmick. I don't think it's a something that should be restricted to consumer grade cameras. I think it makes life easier in general.
That's right. I mean, here's an example. Here's the quick menu. And again, having used other cameras, when I want to go and change, let's say, the autofocus mode, just because I expect it, I want to be able to push here where it says AFC, but I can't. I have to move this over, and then I have to push the button, and now I can do it. But again, I can't touch anything. And it wouldn't bother me except for the fact that I've used cameras where I can do that. And they're so much faster to get things done. And, of course, the big two, I guess, are one is to be able to touch to move your autofocus point around the camera instead of using a wheel. And the other is particularly valuable in video, and that's touch to autofocus. And anybody with a smartphone knows about that one.
Yeah.
So, it's so often happens. We get features on a smartphone that eventually work their way into cameras that should have been there in the first place. And features work their way into consumer cameras and then eventually make their way into pro cameras.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what I have to say about that. I think, putting smartphone or touch capability into the camp of only for consumers is kind of like saying, power windows on your car, that's old school. You don't need power windows. If you're a real driver, you crank your windows like everyone else.
That's right.
Anyway, all right, let's talk about the lens, the guts of this thing. So the lens, the sensor, the shutter, the stuff that actually, aside from the sensor, make the image. How are they? How do they stand up to the Doug test?
Again, let's talk about it within the context of the category.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's a pretty good lens for close-up shooting. I wouldn't call it a macro lens, but you can get in pretty tight with this thing, get some really nice close shots.
Yeah.
Again, the sensor is at 1 inch is quite a bit larger than others. It's 3 times the area of most of the compact cameras, and probably 4 times the area of what people generally call point-and-shoot cameras. And that means it's going to collect 3 or 4 times as much light, which means it's going to be better at high ISOs in terms of noise. The shutter is silent, although how these cameras are, you can turn on a clicking sound.
Yeah.
It's only about a 2,000th of a second, which means if you want to shoot at f1.8 and you're outdoor in the sunlight and you're at 2,000th of a second, there's no way to keep this from blowing out completely. So Sony's put in a 3-stop neutral density filter.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is really nice. And we've seen that on a few other cameras too. And so if you leave that in automatic mode, you don't have to worry about it because it'll just drop that filter in to make the thing 3 stops less sensitive to light and allow you to shoot at the wider apertures in the bright sunlight. That's a really nice feature. You can also control it manually as well.
I think all cameras should have built-in neutral density filters.
I think so. I mean, I use them quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Anything else on the?
Well, it's they say that it shoots 10 frames a second. That's a little misleading. I think it shoots maybe a maximum of 8 frames a second, and it's hard to count 8 things in 1 second, but that's only in what Sony calls on all their cameras speed priority mode, and that means autofocus before the first frame and then don't change focus as you're shooting.
Okay.
But if you're shooting something that's moving and you're in continuous autofocus mode, this thing really falls back to about 2 frames a second. Again, for this class of camera, I think that's fine. I'm not out there shooting, with 11 or 12 frames a second with a big Nikon.
Yeah.
But it's not. Again, it's not a sports or action camera to the same extent that those big pro things are.
Got it. All right, we talked a little bit about the electronic viewfinder, the fact that it pops up now, but what about the quality of it and the LCD on the back? We know it has no touch, but what's the color and the detail like on that thing?
All these cameras these days have pretty good rear LCDs. This one's great. I think it's probably exactly the same quality as the previous version. I can't really remember. I can do this. I can show you a picture.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we take pictures and we wish that things looked as good as they do on the back of our screens. So
right.
I never had a problem with that. But there is one thing new. Although this doesn't have touch, it does articulate, right? So you can bring it up.
The other one didn't do that at all.
Yeah. That's what I was getting to. This is the selfie mode, right? Where the thing actually goes all the way up.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
right.
That's on my NEX5R as well.
Yeah, and that's a real nice feature, and it's smart enough that it also reverses left and right. So as I move left and right, as you can sort of see here, if I can figure out where to put the thing.
There you go.
It's actually reversed the left and right. Otherwise, of course, it drives you crazy as you're trying to take a picture of yourself.
It's mirroring you like a regular mirror. Yeah,
that's right. So that's a nice feature. And as you know, one of the times you use this isn't necessary for selfies, but when you're shooting videos, if you're doing an interview or something and you're looking towards the camera and you want to make sure everything's okay, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the main reason I use that on my my NEX5R is just, you flip that thing up and it gives you the peace of mind of knowing that the red dot is still on and you're still recording.
That's right.
Little peace of mind. Nothing. Yeah. All right. What about connectivity? So, speaking of doing, one-man interviews, one of the cool things for these kind of cameras is being able to, connect to the camera through Wi-Fi and do all that kind of cool stuff. I assume this has Sony Play Memories as a Sony Play Memories app, and you can connect to it that way?
That's correct. And now it's pretty much, as far as I know, every current model Sony camera is exactly the same in this, and that is they have Wi-Fi. They have NFC to make it easy to connect to Android phones. They have installable apps. They do not have GPS. And the installable apps, the one good thing about them is they're all the same for all the cameras as far as I can tell. So the good news is they're all the same. The bad news is it doesn't necessarily have everything you'd want. Their remote app is not the best. I think, Panasonic, again, is probably the leader in that. Olympus is pretty good. Fuji is pretty good. Sony's a little bit farther behind. But it works. And it allows you to do the things you need in terms of controlling the camera.
Yeah, which is cool. I mean, it's an eye-opening experience once you get your brain around how to successfully and repeatedly connect to the camera from your phone. You just start using it all the time, and you find different uses for it. And you're out and about, you take a photo with that awesome camera and suck it into your phone and tweak it and then, put it online or send it to someone. It just changes the quality of your photography when you're sharing it. So, big fan of that.
And again,
what about the NFC piece of this? So this, and first describe what NFC is for folks who may not know.
Yeah, NFC stands for Near Field Communications, and it's capable of doing many things. But what we use it for in the camera world is to quickly connect to a mobile device like a phone and not have to go to the trouble of, doing the SSID and the password and all that kind of stuff. Because one of the things that we do when we use these cameras with our mobile phones is they might not be connected all the time just because of battery drain. So, if you turn off your phone or disconnect the camera, you may have to go through a little bit of trouble to get it started again. This NFC makes it so much easier. Unfortunately, as of now, Apple doesn't support NFC. We're hoping the iPhone 6 does.
Yeah. Let's see. Fingers crossed. It'll either support NFC or some something that Apple cooked up, right?
Yeah. Well,
Oh, okay.
Apple has their equivalent of it. I think it's Bluetooth based, but
Yeah.
nobody uses it.
Right. Right. What else? What other connectivity options other than just plugging it into your computer?
Well, one that's sort of interesting. This little guy will pump out 4K video through the HDMI port. Now,
Nice. I
yeah,
didn't
now,
know that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So you're not recording 4K video.
Right.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say 4K video. That's incorrect. It'll pump out 4K stills. All right.
Okay.
So let's
4K
back up. Right.
still.
So yeah. So if you hook this up to a 4K TV, which of course none of us have yet, then you can look at your images on a 4K TV, and that's going to look pretty damn good.
Okay, I was gonna say because if it can pump out 4K video through the HDMI port, that puts it up there with the A7R
Yeah.
or
Yeah, no,
A7S.
I was
Right?
getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
We just did the GH4 and the A7S, and 4K video has been on our minds, and
Yeah.
no, won't go that far.
Yeah. Cool. All right, and this guy has GPS and all that stuff too.
No,
Right?
no GPS.
No GPS.
No, none of the Sony cameras have GPS built in.
Okay. Okay.
But there are ways to do it by logging the GPS coordinates on your phone and then syncing them with the camera. It's a little bit of a job, but if that's something that's important to you, just go online and search for, GPS syncing to camera or something like that, and you'll find out all the different ways of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And most of which are just a notch too complicated for me to want to do it all the time. For me, it's got to be on my camera, and I could just turn it on.
Right.
And hey, I'm going to whatever country, turn it on while I'm there, log it, then import them and have them show up on a map.
I love geotagged images. I love being able to see where I was standing when I took the shot. And I've got the software installed on my phone, and when I'm out shooting, I never turn it on.
Exactly.
I just never do it. So
yeah, that's the thing. And if you don't do it, what good is it? What about focusing with this? Autofocus versus manual focus. We have focus peaking, which we've been looking for on a lot of these new cameras.
Yeah, so common now. I think every camera that's in this mirrorless world now seems to have focus peaking, thank goodness. It's a good autofocus camera, again, for what it is. You're not going to judge this the same way you're going to judge a DSLR or even a high-end mirrorless camera.
Yeah.
Autofocus is fine. I've never felt it was doing a poor job for me or too slow. It's a great camera for manual focus, which is something that I like to do a lot. And the reason is that one of the things the camera has, and this is true from the old ones too, you have the wheel in the back where you can dial something in. This is one of your ways to control, let's say, aperture, as you can see here.
Yep.
Or there's another control, which is the wheel around the lens. And as I rotate this is actually just another control. And it's soft, so I can connect it to anything. In aperture priority mode, meaning I select the aperture, I might set this to control the aperture, just like a regular camera. But when I go to manual focus mode, I set this to focus. And this allows me to focus the camera with a ring, just like I might normally do. And in that case, I put the aperture back here on this wheel on the rear. So it's pretty nice. It gives you focus peaking and does a really pretty good job.
I like it. So far, not a lot to not like about that camera. What about video? Because I'm a video guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and the video is fine for compact cameras. And let's face it, for video doesn't typically need a really large sensor. So this is a totally adequate sensor for video. You still have the issue of how well it's going to do in low light. It's no Sony A7S, for example, in terms of low light, but the video is very nice out of it. You can shoot 60 frames a second at 1080p, or you can go all the way to 120 frames a second at 720p. So if you want the lower HD resolution of 720, you can get a 4x slow motion effect out of this camera, which is really nice to have.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really cool.
And they have pumped up the bit rate. So at 1080p, it'll go 50 megabits per second, which means you're getting fairly high quality with relatively little compression out of the camera. But here's the big thing. There is, as far as I can tell, no way to connect an external mic or headphones to this. Because they took out the hot shoe. The hot shoe was the way that added those connections, and now we don't even have that. So you're pretty much dead pretty much committed to using just the internal microphone and not being able to monitor on headphones. So that's going to kill it for a lot of apps.
Or, you have to record on a separate digital audio recorder and then match them up later in software, right?
Yeah, which of course is doable, but we're so used to all of the small cameras being able to plug in an external mic for much higher quality audio than you're going to get with the built-in.
Yeah. Well, some people would argue. I mean, it's kind of a moot point. If you're looking at a camera like this, why would you be going through all that stuff to record external audio on a digital audio recorder, then matching it up? Just get a camera that supports that kind of thing and go to town. Don't complain about what this one doesn't have. It's not for you. If that's what you need, go get something else. So speaking of that, of the competition in the world for who this camera's for, who's out there? What are the competing bodies that are going head to head with this particular body?
Well, as you know, we don't do too many point and shoot cameras on All About the Gear. In fact, I think maybe the Mark II might have been the only one we've ever done before. Mm-hmm. And I have to be honest, I don't know many of the cameras I'm going to mention to you, so I'm basing this on what I've read. But I did used to own a Canon S95, which I said I sold in order to help partially pay for this one. Mm-hmm. The latest version of that is a really nice camera, the Canon S120. Now it cost $450. So one of the things to look at when we're comparing these is the cost, because at $800, this camera is pretty much at the top, way at the top of the price spectrum.
Yeah.
So $450 for a Canon S120 is going to give you a great camera, a comparable zoom range, although at the telephoto end, it's not nearly as fast. It's 5.7 instead of 2.8. Has a nice 5x zoom lens on that camera. That's a good one. Mm-hmm. You've also got things like the Nikon Coolpix series. The Nikon S9700 is only $300 or so, and that one has a smaller sensor, but it has a 30x zoom. So that might be something that's more important to you. Save $500 and get a 30x zoom instead of this little 3x zoom.
Yep.
Panasonic Lumix makes some cameras also. You've got things like the ZS40, that's what it's called in North America, or the TZ, or TZ60 if you're not in North America. Also,
look at that one right there. Look at that.
Yeah, is that it? Okay.
That's the GM1 right there.
Oh, the GM1. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that one too. But this little Lumix ZS40 has a 30x zoom also, and it has an electronic viewfinder. Supposedly not a very good one, but that's again only a $400 camera. Now hold up that GM1 again.
Yep, here it is.
All right.
Here's the GM1.
All right. So here, I got to stop talking so we can see yours. But I'm going to turn on your camera.
Here we go. There's a GM1 right there.
So, the GM1 is a great little camera. It's, of course, a micro four thirds camera. It's interchangeable lenses, where, of course, this camera is not. But that GM1 with a starter lens is $100 cheaper than this camera. Yeah. So you can dive into the world of micro four thirds for $100 less than getting the RX100 Mark III. And it has touch.
And it has touch right there.
It has touch. It has a larger sensor. It has interchangeable lenses. So, you have to think pretty much about the use case for these things. And, of course, it's really important for us to mention, as I did at the top of the show, that the other two RX100s are still available. If you don't need the electronic viewfinder, the pop-up viewfinder, you can save yourself $250 and get the Mark II RX100. Or you can save yourself $300 and for $500 get the original RX100. I'd certainly recommend the Mark II if you don't need the viewfinder. Yes, you lose the slight improvement with the new lens, but you save a lot of money.
All right, Doug. Let's wrap this up. This camera, we talked about it kind of a little bit at the beginning, but who, after all that, we know what the camera can do, what it can't do. Its capabilities, the deltas between the Mark II and the Mark III. Who's this for? Who is Sony hoping will buy this particular camera?
Okay, this camera is definitely for people who want the best camera they can get in this form factor and don't care about the price. I think this is a great camera to, as I say, walk out the door with, to take high quality pictures. It is not the camera to take out when you have a job to do. And you mentioned the video.
Yeah.
You know, if you know you're going to shoot video and you're going to set up something, you're not going to take this camera. But this is a camera to always have with you. I don't think it's a good camera for the pure amateur or the family, because it's just too expensive for that, and you can get more features, although not with quite the image quality, for less money.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Yeah, let's wrap this up then. So what's next on the
we got some great stuff coming up.
Yeah.
We've got the Lumix FZ1000 coming in.
Oh, that 4K fixed lens zoom to the moon mega monster. Yeah.
Looking forward to that guy. And then we also have another unusual camera from Sigma. We're getting the DP2 Quattro coming in, which has it's been announced for a while, I guess, but it's just about starting to ship. And we're going to get our hands on one of those real soon.
Love it. Very cool. Awesome. Well, that's it. I mean, I think that's another all about the gear in the can, Doug.
I think we've done it. And,
any parting thoughts?
I just hope they don't come out with a Mark IV pretty soon, because we probably have to do that too. And for the time being, we're going to take a break from Sony. I think we've covered everything. But look out, new camera season is upon us.
Oh yeah, we've got Photokina coming and Photo Plus Expo. It's going to heat up again.
I'm going to take a break. I'm going on vacation.
All right, Doug. Thanks a lot. I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, Frederick. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.